Live in studio by Centre Alliance Senator Rex Patrick. Rex, I trust you haven't been hoarding toilet paper.
No, but the good news is that Kimberly-Clark in South Australia makes toilet paper and have responded, and that's one of the really good things about having Australian manufacturing and the capabilities to manufacture here in Australia. Situations like this, Australian companies can respond.
It is an interesting point at the moment because the biggest threat we have right now is the supply chain from China falling apart. We hear so often, oh, we need to be standing up to China on human rights, we need to be strong with them in our language, and that's true to an extent, but at the same time, we rely on them so much economically.
Yeah, and look, I think this is an interesting study, and it's an unfortunate thing that's happening, but it shows you what could happen in circumstances where if there was a conflict in the South China region, South China Sea, for example, Southeast Asia. What effect would that have on Australia? And we see, we've just heard from Treasury about the impacts of the virus in terms of the effects of supply chain, what that's doing to the construction industry, and indeed just getting access to basic supplies. This could be a very, very good case study for Australia looking into the future.
And we've had Senate estimates in Parliament House this week, which always throws up lots of weird and wonderful stories. You found one in particular of a company, Australian taxpayers basically paying for an oil rig.
Yeah, this is actually an example of total policy failure from government. Australian taxpayers are now being asked initially to put $10 million into operating what is called an FPSO, basically a floating oil processing and storage ship. It's off the coast of Darwin, and the Australian taxpayer is now the operator of that vessel. And it's happened, in a strange way. We had Woodside sell a vessel to a company called Northern Oil and Gas Australia, who operated the vessel. Last year there were some safety concerns in relation to the vessel, and rightfully NOPSEMA basically put a production prohibition on the oil rig. But the government has been terrible in trying to work with the company to get it back to a point where there could be production. Basically forced the company into administration. Now it's gone into liquidation, and so we now have effectively an oil rig that the Australian government is now paying for. There's a regulation passing through the Parliament authorising the expenditure of $10 million of taxpayers' money to operate this vessel in lighthouse mode. But the estimates from industry is, in terms of decommissioning this, it might be a couple of $100 million of taxpayers' money. And this is bizarre in the context of we've got an oil and gas industry operating around this country that generally don't pay much in tax. We've got companies like ExxonMobil over 5 tax transparency years earning $42 billion in revenue and not paying a cent in tax. They then on-sell the asset and then leave the taxpayer to foot the bill in decommissioning. It's just policy failure. And
what do you expect the government to do, though? Because if they don't step in, we're going to have this giant oil rig floating around that's not being properly decommissioned and would have huge environmental impacts.
Well, I have been talking with people who are connected to the company, and there have been offers on the table from the corporate sector, from the oil and gas sector, to get it back online. The problem has been the government has just not been willing to work with the owners to provide a pathway to get them back into production. There's been audits carried out. The company basically said, look, we'll fix everything that needs to be fixed if you give us a guarantee at the end of that that we'll be able to operate. The government wouldn't give that guarantee, and so creditors simply said, this is an open-ended money sink for us, and we'll have to put it into liquidation.
So if we can return to the coronavirus response, we talked about the Treasury hit to the budget. The government's saying there's going to be stimulus and it's going to be billions, not millions. What kind of form do you think that should take?
Well, Treasury have advised that they're going to work that through. They've given some hints that they will focus on business, making sure that people remain employed, because there are a lot of businesses, particularly in the tourism sector, where there's just no income coming in, and we do have to protect those industries.
What do you think of Labor's call that we should be raising Newstart to stimulate the economy?
Well, Centre Alliance has always supported the raising of Newstart for a range of different reasons, and we still of that view. But this would have to be a package that covered a wide sort of sector of the economy, a range of responses, and certainly we wouldn't object to the raising of Newstart to help those people, and not just unemployed. A lot of people don't understand that a lot of people on Newstart are people who have contributed to this country. They're starting the latter part of their life, can't get employment, and but have been great contributors to this country.
And just finally, you've been naming and shaming CEOs in the Senate using your parliamentary privilege to make sure that they're highlighted for not paying their fair share in tax. You've caused quite a bit of stir in the business community.
Well, yes, and in fact that's the aim of the campaign, in fact. A lot of times we talk about companies that aren't paying tax, but the reality is that it's not companies that don't pay tax. It is the directors of those companies that are controlling the financial arrangements that cause companies not to pay tax. I'm lifting the corporate veil. In terms of using parliamentary privilege, that privilege belongs to the people, to my constituents. It allows me to say inside the parliament what they can't say outside. We need to call out the directors of these companies that are deliberately structuring their companies' affairs such that they don't pay any tax and contribute to healthcare, to education, to infrastructure, all the things that they enjoy in terms of a business. They have an ecosystem around them that they're not paying for.
Well, I'm sure you'll be continuing your campaign. How many CEOs do you have?
Well, there are 221 companies in the tax transparency data that collectively have revenues of $850 billion and paid no tax. So there's no shortage of people for me to call out.
There we go. Got a few years out of that. Rex Patrick, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.